individuals and households are able to make informed choices about how they can use financial services to save, to borrow, and to invest. Financial literacy, therefore, is the second of the twin pillars of financial deepening. It stimulates demand for financial services by giving people the information and making them aware of what services are available and how they can be used by them to improve their lives at a reasonable cost. At the same time, the benefits of financial inclusion are predicated on something else, and that is financial stability. There's no sense including people and then exposing them to risk and they lose more. Much work is being done to maintain this bedrock for successful financial inclusion and financial literacy initiatives. Amendments to the Bank of Jamaica Act are being prepared, which will, once they're approved, assign formal responsibility to Bank of Jamaica for overseeing financial stability. The amendments will, among other things, facilitate more effective coordination amongst financial sector regulators and provide a statutory basis for macro-prudential surveillance. And that is an activity that is aimed at the early identification of systemic risks, risks that arise just from the complicated interaction of all the parts of the system as they intersect with the real world. That's what we mean by systemic risks. Macroprudential surveillance aims at the early identification of systemic risks to financial stability so that we can take appropriate action early enough that it does not cause damage to the system and thereby undermine efforts at financial inclusion and at the general economic activity in the country. We have seen what happens in the world, most recently in the world financial collapse or crisis starting in 2008. As an example where a systemic risk emerges that then turns the whole world down a path of economic decline, stagnation, and lost opportunities. So it is in fact extremely important. But in addition to this, we are preparing legislation that will consolidate into one the various statutes that cover deposit-taking institutions, and by that we're talking about mainly banks and building societies, mainly. It will eliminate inconsistencies and remove remaining opportunities for regulatory arbitrage. The proposed legislation is expected to include provisions to permit some banking services to be provided through agents, and that is intended to facilitate the orderly and safe expansion of mobile money services and other modern retail payment activities, again to the benefit of financially informed and financially literate consumers. We are also including an enforceable code of conduct for deposit-taking institutions, which is aimed at advancing consumer protection in this area. These two innovations, the enforceable code of conduct and the creation of mechanisms for agents in the banking system to allow for the rapid expansion in a safe and orderly way of mobile and retail payment services using modern technologies. These are two innovations which I believe are relevant to the topic that you are going to discuss later today. In closing, I would like to wish for the JDIC a very successful event today and tomorrow, events, and more important, many more years of service of this quality to the nation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Governor. Ladies and gentlemen, if the next speaker looks familiar, he should. He's Jamaican, worked here at the Central Bank for quite a while, and if you went shopping on weekends, you would often see him buying the latest power tools at True Value. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the Financial Sector Supervision Advisor for the Caribbean Regional Technical Assistance Center, known to its friends as CARTA, my good friend, Mr. Courtney Christie Veach.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. Dr. the Honorable Peter Phillips, Minister of Finance and Planning, Mr. Peter Thomas, the CEO, the Chairman of JDIC, Brian Winter, Governor of the Bank of Jamaica, Ms. Antoinette McCain, CEO of JDIC, and our guest speaker today, Mr. Ian Nicola, other distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, students. We're all aware of the importance and the significance of education to a people. And over the years, Jamaica has prided itself in having one of the best education systems in the Caribbean, and indeed, I dare say, globally, notwithstanding the current challenges that we're faced with. I grew up in a little town called Sturchtown in St. Anne, where people were so invested in education that the grade 4 boys in the all-age school used to challenge the teachers to a game of cricket back in the day, I was told by my parents. And they requested as a prize, if they won that game, not some name brand clothes or shoes or the latest hairstyle to wear to school, but if they won, they challenged the teachers that they wanted to be taught algebra. That was the extent at which persons were glued on and clued into education and literacy in those days. Not too sure if much has changed, I hope not. Not too far afield in Barbados, where the CARTA office is located, education has played a significant role in that economy. So much so that the opposition leader in her budget speech just a couple of weeks ago, and in her bid for the government to continue to support tertiary education, to fully fund students at the tertiary level, she postulated that what bauxite has been for Jamaica, and I quote her, and oil has been for Trinidad, education has been for Barbados. And it's no wonder then that we all know Barbados has one of the highest literacy rates in the Caribbean. I believe the time is right to add another pillar to literacy and the general literacy program in Jamaica to widen our vision. And so I applaud the efforts of JDIC as we look at financial inclusion and promoting financial literacy in Jamaica. Jamaica is no stranger to financial literacy and financial inclusion. I remember some 10 years ago while I was at the Bank of Jamaica, I was a part of a team with Monica Brown in the Financial Services Supervision Department, and Brian Winter, who was then at the FSC, and Winston Carr, who was at the JDIC. We used to go on road shows right across the island, Montego Bay, Savlamar, Morant Bay, to educate and promote literacy on financial services and financial products, particularly from the regulated entity side. I think that it's important, and I hope that that program has been sustained, and it's important to widen that, to include other stakeholders, so that we can make sure the private sector, commercial banks, are on those road shows, the Consumer Affairs Commission are on those road shows to educate and promote the products and the services, to educate members of the public about the importance of financial information and the data that they are receiving. We are quite pleased at CARTAC of one of our new initiatives and not so new to many persons, but Basel II implementation in the Caribbean. And I'm happy the steering committee, which Brian Winter, Governor Winter chairs, is happy. The donors of CARTAC, we are happy that Jamaica is among one of the 7 countries that are currently implementing Basel II in the Caribbean. And the reason for this delight is because Basel II is really a program of risk management and ensuring that supervisors have the tool to supervise the entities and ensure that they keep adequate capital to manage those risks. So, but in addition to that, there's what is called this third pillar, or pillar 3 of Basel II, which is really transparency and disclosure requirement. So what that will do is to ensure and encourage and mandate, to an extent, commercial entities, banks in particular, to publish more information on their capital, on risk management, on their products, and their services. It therefore means that this initiative by JDIC is quite timely, because the more information that the banks have out there about their products and services will mean that more persons will be able to access this information, and therefore financial literacy will become even more important to understand the information that has been public. It is therefore no doubt that CARTAC is extremely delighted to support this Financial Markets Symposium under the theme Financial Inclusion through Public Education and Awareness. And I dare say that CARTAC stands ready to support the authorities in Jamaica when that time comes to develop that strategy, a national strategy for financial inclusion and financial literacy. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Courtney, and welcome home. Ladies and gentlemen, we now get into the meat of the matter where today's proceedings are concerned. I hope you've had your coffee and that you're bright and bushy-tailed and ready to pay attention, because there just might be homework. Financial literacy, ladies and gentlemen, can be described as the ability to understand both personal and broader financial matters, apply that knowledge, and assume responsibility for one's financial decisions. Financial inclusion, as the Governor just intimated, is about affordable access by all to quality and sound financial services. Financial literacy empowers you to make better decisions, and we all know that economies overall will ultimately perform better when individuals are so empowered and have such access. When the economy does better, we all do better. We make more money, Minister Phillips collects more taxes, the IMF is happy, everybody is happy. Financial literacy and inclusion is important to all of us, ladies and gentlemen. And as I welcome you all once again, I'd like to remind you that what we gather to discuss today is not only worthy, but necessary. At this time, we must say a very special welcome to a very first presenter, as it is she who has been ably spearheading these 15th anniversary celebrations and activities. She celebrated her birthday last week, so belated happy birthday. And since she used to work here, we say welcome home. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the CEO of the JDIC, Ms. Antoinette McCain.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. I'd just like to thank Bishop Taylor, Don Taylor, who's actually a friend of mine, for giving blessings to these proceedings to focus upon the Christian principles of service for the common good. I'd like to thank Dr. the Honorable Peter Phillips, Minister of Finance and Planning, for supporting this effort with both his message that he allowed us to publish in the Sunday newspaper supplement, and today for his attendance and for his greetings. I'd like to thank the chairman of the Jamaica Deposit Insurance Corporation, Mr. Peter Thomas, and our board members present. I see Mrs. Maddy, my reporter, for supporting the management in bringing these anniversary activities to fruition. And thank you to Governor Brian Winter for facilitating this. I welcome the Financial Secretary, Mr. Devon Rowe, Mrs. Marlene Street Forrest, Mr. Courtney Kristovich. I welcome our overseas presenters, Mr. Ian Kola and Ms. Ladi Franklin. And I welcome the Jamaican presenters. There's Dr. McNaughton, Dr. Lawrence, both of the University of the West Indies, Mr. Livingston Morrison, Deputy Governor of the Bank of Jamaica, and Mr. Donald Wignall, President of the MSME Alliance Limited. Ms. Holness, the Executive Director of the Financial Services Commission, was unavoidably absent. I'd also like to welcome our representatives from the Colombian Embassy, Mr. Jermaine Corrales Benedetti, who's consul, and Mr. William Bush, who's Minister Consul from the Colombian Embassy. I'd also like to welcome the IMF representative, Mr. Van Sel. And I would like to thank all the attendees who have been specially invited stakeholders in this process. I'd just like to say that between the minister, the governor, and the chairman, they have brought to you all the principal ideas surrounding these issues of financial inclusion. So it certainly does make my presentation that much easier, but my presentation will be simpler because the stakeholders here are diverse, and so I'm not going to start by assuming that everyone is familiar with everything. So I'd just like to point out to you the purpose of this symposium. The JDIC, Jamaica Deposit Insurance Corporation, marks 15 years in operation of protecting deposits in the regulated financial system. And as you have heard the minister say, the financial system has been sound these past 15 years. And in fact, thanks to the regulation, even during the global financial crisis starting 2008 to present, our financial institutions in this country have been resilient. So there is no doubt that the system is sound and regulated. We have stood the test of that more recent crisis. This symposium is intended to allow an exchange of current thoughts on financial literacy and financial inclusion by diverse public sector and private sector stakeholders with a common interest, basically, in economic inclusion, economic growth and development towards households being able to manage their economic and social lives. And the general track of the world is that we will all have to manage our economic lives going forward. That's the way the world is going, and we felt here at JDIC that the basis of this must be with financial literacy as the platform. This, however, is only part of a 3-day event. You will note in your packages that you have a program of activities for the symposium today, but also a program for presentations at the Financial Markets Fair. And what you will note from your program at the fair, which takes place on Friday, tomorrow, and Saturday at the St. William Grant Park, is that the speakers there, the presenters there, are equally as esteemed as the presenters here. So I would like take this opportunity to ask you all and your families to try to support the fair also. The fair, just to point out, has booth holding by private sector financial firms, government regulatory firms in finance, company formation, microfinance, educational children's village, tours of the Bank of Jamaica Stock Exchange, and actually stock market trading. And all those events are intended to be interactive. The public can ask questions and get information without fear, just asking the questions that you always wanted to ask. The title of my presentation is The Role of Deposit Insurance in Financial Inclusion. And it looks at three areas. Why deposit insurance schemes, financial system stability and confidence. And that's an important question for us because from time to time, over the years, policy makers may feel, why a deposit insurance scheme? It also looks at the core principles of effective deposit insurance schemes. Those core principles are international standards that have been agreed between the IMF, the World Bank, and the International Association of Deposit Insurers. And it gives you guidelines as to what will make a system effective, taking into account your local context. And just the last thing we look at is deposit insurance and financial inclusion. Now, we have here today both the Kingston Technical High School, and we also have Monroe College. And we have a number of other persons who might not be completely familiar with the beginning, with why we do this at all. Why is this so important? And just a very simplified graph on how financial flows through our economy. And basically, businesses and households have income in say the first period. That income is paid to taxes, money that you save, and spending. And if that spending goes towards those people those monies go into the system to people who want to borrow. And when they borrow, you have further business spending, household spending, and government spending, which then goes to make up the total spending, and then that means income for households in the second period. So that is the basic flow. So having this flow efficient is very important to our economy. And herein comes the banks. The banks play the role in our payment system of intermediaries between savers and borrowers. Those same savers who I just said put the money into savings, the borrowers get access to those funds, and then themselves go on to have businesses and have household spending. And so the banks as intermediaries are intermediary between the savers themselves and the borrowers, or savers would have to go out and find borrowers on their own. But banks play that role. And banks also play the role of transmitting monetary policy. Those are the policies of your central bank to keep prices stable in the economy. So banks are very important. Pretty much the intermediation process. In the middle there, with the columns, is a bank, and the funds at the bottom, the funds provider provides these funds to the banks for savings, and they do get a return on it, and the bank gives it to borrowers. And between the bank and the central bank, monetary policy to keep prices stable can take place. Now, just to the establishment of the deposit insurance scheme, it was established in 1998 under the Deposit Insurance Act as part of the framework to strengthen the financial system. And it guarantees the deposits of the regulated financial system, as protection of depositors is seen by governments as one of the tools to engender depositor confidence and financial system stability. At the establishment, this was the first CEO of the JDIC, Mr. Winston Carr, giving the certificate of deposit insurance to a bank for the first time. Now we just put it in the mail, but that's how it's done. Then the JDIC itself, when it was established, became part of a financial system safety net. The safety net starts at the top with the Ministry of Finance and Planning, and that's the red up top, and the Jamaica Deposit Insurance Corporation, the Bank of Jamaica, regulates deposit-taking institutions, and the Financial Services Commission regulates the non-deposit-taking institutions. The heads of the JDIC, the Bank of Jamaica, the Financial Services Commission, also meet as a financial regulatory council, where we share information, discuss issues in the financial system, so that we all understand the system together and can take such action as is required. So the financial system safety net generally has the 4 objectives: bank regulation and supervision are designed to ensure that banks operate in a safe and sound manner. The banking system also has that lender of last resort facility offered by the central bank, where banks may have some liquidity needs, and the central bank can meet those. Then there are failure resolution mechanisms for failing institutions to ensure that failing banks are removed quickly or resolved to ensure the stability of the financial system. And finally, with the introduction of deposit insurance, the safety net now has a system for the protection of depositors, and particularly those smaller scale depositors who generally are considered more vulnerable in our financial system. And just to say, just to make the point that sometimes persons feel that the regulatory system is protecting the banks. It's not protecting the banks, it's protecting the depositors, because of that flow of depositors' savings and spending that goes through the economy. And that's the importance of it. Of course, upon the cooperation of the public, and I underline this because this is the important conversation we're having today, on its intelligent support and use of a reliable system. So what he was saying back then in 1993 is that the public has to be educated and the system has to be reliable. And this is what this whole discourse about public education, financial literacy for our people, and ultimately financial inclusion is all about. And he said, one more point before I close, there will be, of course, some banks unable to reopen without being reorganized. And the new laws of the government would assist us in making reorganizations quickly and effectively. And in that case, he said, even to subscribe to at least part of the new capital, which might have been required. But he also said, I hope you can see from this elemental recital, that was his speech, of what your government is doing, that there's nothing complex or radical in the process. And I'd like to think that is what it is. It's the proper systems put in place must be seen as not complicated and not radical, but achieve the objective of financial stability and financial system confidence. I thought those were really old words, but sometimes very old words sometimes mean a lot. And when you think about them, there have been other banking crises in the United States, so sometimes I guess the words got lost, and we have to remind ourselves about these old words again and again. Now, the COP, as part of its credibility and ensuring that its standards are standards that will allow for an effective deposit insurance system, the JDIC subscribes to the core principles of effective deposit insurance systems. I'd just like to say something about the core principles. They're the International Association of Deposit Insurance Systems core principles. And just as a factoid here for you, IADI, the International Association of Deposit Insurers, was established in 2002. And Jamaica, under the leadership of the JDIC at the time, Mr. Winston Carr, was one of the subscribers to the Memorandum of Association of the countries that established the International Association of Deposit Insurers. Just to, as I said, as a factoid, there were 15 countries and Jamaica was among them. Now, the core principles developed out of a 2008 Financial Stability Forum report on enhancing market and institutional resilience. And this was when they saw what was happening during the global financial crisis. They thought deposit insurance schemes needed to be strengthened and needed to have a guiding set of principles that would keep them strong. So the principles themselves were actually developed in 2009. And there are 18 of them, but I don't have to talk to you about all of them. But just that there are some preconditions that were declared for the principles, that they should take close account of the broader characteristics of safety net arrangements. And we saw the financial system safety net in the slide with the red and the blue boxes. And including those regulatory and supervisory framework and resolution procedures for failing institutions. And that is why the JDIC works so closely with the Bank of Jamaica's regulatory arm, the Financial Services Commission and the Stock Exchange, because for the system to be sound, we work together. The core principles declared that the benefits of deposit insurance were these. A deposit insurance system clarifies the authority's obligations to depositors, limits the scope of discretionary decisions, can promote public confidence, help contain the costs of resolving failed banks, and can provide countries with an orderly process for dealing with bank failures and mechanisms for banks to fund the costs of the failures themselves. However, just to point out that a deposit insurance system is not intended to deal by itself with systematic